Our next speaker is Carly Roberts. What does it mean to love kids?
Think about the words you would want someone to use to describe your child's teacher. What about the words you would want someone to use to describe your child's classroom? Now think about the words you would want someone to use to describe your child. When you think about your child's teacher, maybe you hope that they're described as warm, skilled, effective, kind. Maybe you hope that your child's classroom is described as exciting, engaging, or creative. And maybe you hope that your child is described as curious, funny, smart, kind. For the most part, I'm guessing that most of you were thinking of positive words that convey an image of an effective and skilled practitioner who creates rich learning environments where students can be engaged and are held to high expectations. Unfortunately, these positive images may not be true for all learners, particularly for students with intellectual disability. My research suggests that instead of the positive words that came to your mind when you thought about your child and their classroom and teacher, that many people view these students, their teachers, and their classrooms as a place where babysitting or caregiving happens instead of meaningful and rigorous learning. Instead of words like curious or smart to describe students, one of my participants, a high school principal, explained that teaching these students was kind of elementary, and that it wasn't very hard to make them love you because they aren't very complicated. When asked to describe characteristics of expert teachers, this principal explained that the number one thing is that teachers love and care for their students, and described his best teacher as being like a mama duck. When asked to identify some of the practices we know to be most effective for this population, and asked what he would look for in a high-quality classroom for these students, he was unable to identify any of the best practices we know to be effective through research for students with intellectual disability. Yet despite this, he went on to explain that the segregated special ed program in his school should be considered exemplar. Now think back. How would you feel if your child, their teacher, and their classroom were described in this narrow, deficit, underwhelming manner, instead of in the rich, strengths-based narrative that we know every child deserves? My research suggests that many people, including educators, hold these deficit views about students with intellectual disabilities and their teachers in classrooms. And instead of spaces where students are engaged and challenged, they're viewed as places where loving students does not equate to holding students to high expectations. Now, this administrator, like all of us, was socialized into a system of special education that uses a medical model to frame disability from a deficit lens, where students and their teachers are viewed as less than, and thus the same high-quality standards don't apply. So what do we do about this? Well, challenging this long-standing and well-documented deficit view of special education in order to include all learners requires widespread collaboration and a radical shift in instructional practices, values, and beliefs. It requires schools committing to challenging these deficit negative stereotypes about students and teachers, while also aiming to improve instructional practices for all learners. Because you have to do both to change systems. It's not just a recipe card of practices that you check off, and it's not just having the conversations. They have to be thoughtfully connected. And fortunately for us, the schools in our area and around the country, many are willing to engage in this complex and hard work. And these are the schools that I'm interested in working in. In my current research, I partner with local schools who are engaging in this complex work, and they're in it for the long haul. And my school partners are willing to learn alongside me and challenge these long-standing deficit narratives about students that don't follow a typical trajectory. Because why, yes, of course we should care, teachers should care and love their students. We also know that loving students goes beyond the troubling stereotype of simply being a mama duck. Loving students involves holding them and their teachers to high expectations. Thank you.